assistance is run by a bunch of investment bankers, and Morningstar's tools can help make
one of the things that we've heard a lot of questions about recently is, how do we kind of fix the system from where we are now, where, we see all these things in Congress, kind of all these, leverage. What do you think would need to happen in terms of reform to kind of get the system to where it would need to be?
The first and foremost is to empower the investors. The individual investor is basically powerless. He's told, or she's told, if you don't like what management is doing, get out. And therefore, the top bosses who don't own the company control the people, the shareholders who do own the company. The second is the mutual funds and the pension funds have got to exert their fiduciary responsibility. If they were alert and willing to blow the whistle on Wall Street years ago, this never would have happened, this collapse. So they have their own conflicts of interest, obviously, with doing 401k investments for the big companies on the one hand, and they're supposed to have fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders on the other, their investors. So that's the second. Third, there's got to be a strong consumer regulatory agency, and the one that's being proposed is not strong enough. And fourth, there's got to be a displacement of the rating agencies. They are in a inexhaustible conflict of interest. I mean, they're paid by the companies that they're rating. Fifth, certain derivatives have to be banned. Derivatives that basically are by people who have no stake, no collateral, should never be prohibited, should never be allowed. And the rest of the derivatives have got to be put on exchanges with adequate collateral and adequate disclosure. So those are some of the things that have to be done, and very little of those things really are in the present bill in Congress that President Obama expects to sign. And I thought Gretchen Morgenson in the Sunday New York Times the other day had it just right when she said, this legislation is not going to prevent a repeat of the wild speculation, the betting on betting on betting that is plaguing Wall Street and creating disaster for the rest of the real economy.
So some of the issues where, worrying about the banks that are too big to fail, they really need to be worrying about the banks continuing to take on the risks that they were before?
Yes, if a bank is too big to fail, it's too big to exist. And Senator Sanders has a bill to remedy that and put a size limit on these banks. Because think of it, what if you're a small bank competing with a bank that's too big to fail with Uncle Sam as a guarantee? Is that a fair competition? Of course not. And now the Wall Street collapse has created fewer, larger banks with larger market shares, making the next likelihood of a crash more likely.
So do you have any, kind of thoughts, maybe switching gears a little bit about, there's a lot of talk about manufacturing jobs, leaving the United States, and that, potentially the Chinese currency plays a role in that, or other factors. It's a time to kind of reinstate, some sort of industrial policy or worry about this kind of currency controls.
Well, the real economy is being exported to fascist and communist regimes overseas who know how to keep the workers in their place, with modern equipment and capital, and shipping back to the U.S., hollowed communities, unemployed workers. The paper economy, which is a speculative economy that does not produce real things, is thriving in this country, especially since the more reckless it is, the more it can bank on the U.S. taxpayer via Uncle Sam to bail them out. Socialism bailing out communism. How's that for an irony? So I think we got to get back to the real economy and stop giving tax breaks and deregulation and all other things to basically Las Vegas East, a casino economy, a phrase first coined by Business Week over 10 years in a cover story describing Wall Street.
You mentioned the other economies are fascist economies, or let's just say less than democratic. What would you propose to be able to convince these other nations to adopt more free market economics and more fair competition? What would you propose to Congress?
Well, there needs to be international treaties to deal with counterfeiting to begin with. That should be easy. And second, there needs to be a world living wage. and 50 cents an hour is not a living wage in China. So otherwise, these countries will repress their workers and pull down our economy. These trade agreements, WTO, NAFTA, I call them pull-down trade agreements, not pull-up trade agreements. So we should back the International Labor Organization of the United Nations, which has for years established fair working condition standards and wages, and try to have a more level playing field. We would never allow Mississippi to attract business from the other 49 states by having a $2 minimum wage and horrendous working conditions. So why are we allowing China to do the same thing?